I have never doped. I can say it again, but I've said it for 7 years. It doesn't help. But the fact of the matter is I haven't. And if you consider my situation, a guy who comes back from arguably a death sentence, why would I then enter into a sport and dope myself up and risk my life again? That's crazy. I would never do that.
So that's cycling superstar Lance Armstrong, who could now be stripped of his 7 Tour de France titles after a U.S. body that polices drug use in sports said it would bring doping charges against him. Good morning. I'm Rolf Winkler. Welcome to the News Hub. Joining me are Reed Albergotti and Vanessa O'Connell, who've been all over this story. And first off, let's say that, of course, we see Lance Armstrong said that he never doped, and he's responding to these charges from the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency. Let's see if we can get those up on screen, JR. So he's saying that, obviously, I'm the only athlete that USADA has chosen to charge. USADA's malice, its methods, its star chamber practices are at odds with our ideals of fairness and fair play. I've never doped, and unlike many of my accusers, I've competed as an endurance athlete for 25 years with no spike in performance, is what he's saying. Now, let's back it up to today, Vanessa, and tell me, where are we? What federal prosecutors, of course, had said that they just recently decided not to bring charges.
That's right. That's right. So USADA is not bringing any kind of criminal charges. With the case that was out of the U.S. Attorney's Office in Los Angeles, there was some difficulty essentially showing that doping is a crime, and there's possible evidence issues here. Here, USADA, which polices doping in sport or drug use in sport, has notified Lance Armstrong that it intends to essentially charge him with doping. Now, the consequences for him could be possible ban from triathlons,
which is what he does currently,
which is now what he's doing, which he's done since he initially started out as a triathlete, actually before cycling, and now he's been competing in triathlons since retiring from professional cycling in 2011. He also could be, importantly, stripped of all 7 of his yellow jerseys or Tour de France titles. So that is essentially what's at risk.
What is the evidence that USADA is pointing to?
Well, what they've done is they've laid it all out in a 15-page letter so far, where they say they have testimony from 10 cyclists, or more than 10 cyclists and staff members on Lance Armstrong's former teams, who've essentially told the whole story. They've come clean in order to clear the air in cycling and talked about doping on that team. Now, they were offered cooperation. USADA has said that it has also offered cooperation to Lance Armstrong, and he turned it down. So it's a mixture of testimony and also some scientific evidence. They said that they had blood samples from 2009 and 2010. If you remember, those are years after his comeback after his retirement, that also show evidence of blood manipulation, transfusions, and the use of EPO, which is a blood-boosting hormone.
Now, I want to bring viewers back to July 2010, when you guys published still what is one of my favorite stories that has been in the journal since I've worked here, frankly, in which Floyd Landis really bared his soul to you guys about doping in cycling. Can you share with us some of the more dramatic episodes that he described?
Yeah, it was a really interesting time, because what had happened was Floyd Landis was a former teammate of Lance Armstrong's and had tested positive himself after winning the Tour de France, and kind of, fallen into hard times, and had just decided he was going to send these emails to people in cycling and kind of lay it out all on the table. And that actually sparked the federal criminal investigation. And, we broke that story about, these emails and people looking into them. And after we broke that, Landis agreed to sit down and really go into all the nitty-gritty details.
What were some of those? Like that you talk about the hotel, for instance, with they would tape over everything to prevent hidden cameras?
Yeah, there were times where, the teams travel around in buses in the mountains of France, and, they go from hotel to hotel. And there were times when they were very worried. The French police had actually cracked down on doping in the Tour de France and were raiding hotel rooms. So they were very worried at times about getting caught. This is all according to Landis's interviews, and they would actually tape up light fixtures in case the rooms were bugged, and turn these hotel rooms into sort of a makeshift MASH unit or a hospital where they would do blood drips, transfuse fresh blood to keep them going in Tour de France.
An idea of boosting, I guess, red blood cells to help oxygen delivery and make are there any other kind of I guess there was the hotel room. There was
actually, Rolf, what was interesting is that it wasn't just Floyd. It wasn't just Floyd's account that gave us confidence in this story back in 2010 and sort of led us to understand that this was really a big story. But we spoke to other cyclists as well that were on the same team, the U.S. Postal Service team, as well as in professional cycling, who gave us accounts that were very similar to Floyd's. Essentially, Floyd's account was one where you had this very sort of naive, young, talented cyclist who essentially was corrupted as he became a part of the U.S. Postal team, and that was Floyd's account. Again, we did find that other cyclists had similar stories. So
what happens now is my last question.
So what happens now, I mean, one of the big defenses that Lance Armstrong has put forward all these years is that he's never tested positive. And this is actually what could happen. I mean, he could essentially test positive. It's not an analytical finding where, you know, they find some substance in his blood or urine. This would be a positive test based on a multitude of pieces of information. And they call it a non-analytical positive test. And based on, you know, the evidence, USADA is saying that they can strip him of all of his Tour de France titles, not just the ones in the past 8 years, which is the statute of limitations set forth by the World Anti-Doping Agency, because there was this conspiracy to cover it up and lies, essentially, over the years.
Great. Reed, Vanessa, thank you so much for joining us. You guys have been all over the story, and you'll continue to be, of course.